Okay, can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Hi, everybody. Honored to be a guest speaker. My name is James Gibson. I'm a researcher at Season, which is Center for International Earth Science Information Network. It's a part of Columbia University, and I work in the Geospatial Application Division, where I do a lot of work on using global open data to compute SDG indicators. And we work very closely with SDGs today and Anella. So just wanted to give you like an overview of what I do and talk about and try to like integrate some of the stuff that Anella was just talking about regarding story maps and GIS. So I'm guessing that you guys are pretty familiar with the SDGs at this point, but just to recap, what are they? They're 17 different goals that the UN established to try to shape a better future for our planet. And what I'm not sure if you guys are, I mean, you guys have definitely talked about indicators, but I'm not sure if you guys know how much you guys have talked about it, but there's over 200 indicators that the UN has established to try to measure progress towards each of these 17 different goals. Um, and at Season, what we're trying to do is we're trying to use open data. So just wanted to take a moment to talk about open data. Open data is really important. It's data that's accessible, anyone can access. It's transparent data, and there's a growing movement in the data science community to start using open data in all different kinds of projects. Open data is really important because for the SDGs, because it will allow us to facilitate cross-country comparisons. By making that data accessible, everyone, any country should be able to access the data and run and compute an indicator using the methodologies that like we've prepared and compare with other countries. So it also kind of gives that power back to those countries to try it so that be like, hey, we developed this methodology and you can do it too. Another really important thing is that open data addresses gaps and disparities in data. So this is a huge thing, especially because of COVID. A lot of different statistical offices in countries, they haven't been able to report as much or produce as much data as they normally would. And this has been highlighted in several different UN reports. And open data is one way that we can bridge those gaps. So, for example, like I don't know if you guys are familiar with remote sensing data. Remote sensing data is data produced by satellites. Um, and so you have satellite imagery of the entire world, and you might be able to use that data to kind of bridge some of these gaps where, I don't know, like one country is like really good at like reporting, having an inventory of like forests, but another country doesn't have that data. But then you can use satellite imagery of land cover and make an estimate of how much forest that country has, something like that. Um, and another really great thing about open data is that it evolves over time. So it allows for that tracking and that monitoring of the indicators and how they change in each country over time. Um, so at Season, I've been able to develop 4 different methodologies for computing 4 different of the SDG indicators using open data. And so I just wanted to take you through those different methodologies and the work I've been doing. So the first indicator is SDG indicator 7.1.1, which is access to electricity. And SDG 7, Sustainable Development Goal 7, is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And in 2019, it was estimated that 759 billion people around the world lacked access to the electricity, still lack access to electricity, which is kind of staggering if you think about it. Like here in the States, I think we really take that for granted in a lot of ways. I also just wanted to open it up to the chat and just like if you guys want to like write in the chat or like raise your hand, just what electricity is important for, why is this indicator so important, and just like share your thoughts as I go and just kind of make it a little bit more interactive. So indicator 7.1.1 is really important for measuring access electricity. In this case, we're measuring where there's lack of access to electricity. A lot of countries are really good at reporting this indicator. It's what's referred to as a tier 1 indicator. There's 3 tiers for the indicators. Tier 1 is something that's very easy to produce. There's a very established methodology. And tier two is a little bit more ambiguous, but there is a methodology in place. And then tier three is there's no longer any tier three indicators, I believe, as of recently, but tier three was when there wasn't a methodology for computing an indicator. And a lot of countries are really great at reporting access electricity, but not every country has the same level of detail. So we proposed using nighttime lights satellite imagery, which comes from this instrument on one of NASA's satellites called VEERS, to kind of bridge that gap. So we start with the nighttime lights data, and then this is also in GIS, which Nella was talking about. It's a really important software that we use at Season. So we start with the nighttime lights data. We create a binary raster. So is there lights? Is there not lights? Just really simplifying the data set, 0 or 1 kind of situation. And then we overlap this with population data, gridded population data. And from that, we're able to estimate access electricity on the subnational scale. So in this case, we're seeing the results for Vietnam, but we've computed this globally and at both the national and subnational levels. The next 3 indicators, they all use OpenStreetMap. Yeah, and this, sorry, I just wanted to look at the chat because I do want to make it a little bit interactive. But yeah, like especially throughout COVID, it's like access to electricity is definitely something that's like been taken. I think like in some cases there actually was a step backwards because of COVID for gaining access to electricity. Yeah, so any thoughts you guys have, just share them in the chat. I'd love to hear them. The next 3 indicators, they all rely heavily on this resource called OpenStreetMap, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with. It's really cool. It's a crowdsourced geospatial data set, basically. And I just wanted to show you an example. So if you go to openstreetmap.org, you can just look around and you can just do a simple query. And it's people all around the world digitizing features throughout the world, which is like just so cool to me that it's like everyone from all around the world coming together to create a data set that is just so valuable. And so if you just like query like Midtown Manhattan, like on the left, you'll see like all of these things that have been digitized, like restaurants, roadways, different like hotels and buildings and things like that. And this data set is really key for the next 3 indicators. So I just wanted to introduce you to that. Okay, SDG indicator 9.1.1. So SDG 9 is all about building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. SDG indicator 9.1 measures the proportion of the rural population who live within 2 kilometers of an all-season road. And it's often referred to as the Rural Access Index. Now, I want you guys to tell me in the chat, why is access to roads so important? And why is it important that they're all season roads? And why is it really important, especially for rural communities? Why is access to these roads so important? Why is this indicator so important? I'll just give you guys a second. Also, if anyone wants to speak too, they can. That's okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. Healthcare access to like all these different resources that are super important, access to markets, access to like economic centers, things like that. Makes it like access to schools is a great answer. Yeah, it's super important. So for this indicator, it's a little bit more complicated. So we start with this data set produced by the European Commission called GHS SMOD. And GHS SMOD, it breaks, yeah, these are all great answers. Sorry, I'm just reading through the chat. These are all great answers. And emergencies, sure, like especially with like climate change and like disaster risk management and things like that, super important. But yeah, so it starts off with GHS mod, which is this really cool layer that breaks the world into urban and rural areas. And then from that, we just extract the rural zones only because for this indicator, we're only really caring about rural population. And then again, we're going to combine this with grid population data. And the really key data is the data from OSM that resource I just showed you, roads data from OSM that's been filtered for what we would consider all season roads. So when you're digitizing features in OSM, they'll have like kind of sub fields that we were able to use to kind of like guess is this a reason is this an all season road? Is this a road that's gonna be motorable all year round? So like things like what is the road made of? Like what's the surface type? And they like there's like an access tag and things like that are really helpful in us like filtering that huge OSM roads database into just what are all season roads. And so then we would buffer that, which is a tool in GIS. So making like a region around the roads that's 2 kilometers. And using that, we're able to extract the population in these rural areas that are in that buffer that have access to an all-season road and compute SDG 9.1. Okay, so then the next two have to do with SDG 11. SDG 11 is the focus is cities, making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. SDG indicator 11.2.1 is specifically the proportion of population has convenient access to public transport by sex, age, and persons with disabilities. So it's New York City. We are super, for whoever's in New York, I guess, or whatever major city, public transit is like really valuable. But it's predicted by the UN that only about half the world's urban population has convenient access to public transport. So there's just a lot of room for improvement. And in this indicator, they define convenient access as either 0.5 kilometers to a low capacity public transport point or 1 kilometer to a high capacity public transport point. So a low capacity public transport point might be like a bus, and then a high capacity public transport point would be like rail, like a train. So again, similar to a lot of the answers you gave about why like roads are so important, they kind of oh, sorry. I'll wrap up as fast as I can. So a lot of the reasons that roads are important are the same reasons that public transport is important. So again, we're using OSM data, some urban data, and created population data to calculate public transit. Then for indicator 11.1, this one's focused on access to open public space. And so like parks and different green spaces and roads in urban areas. So again, we're using OSM data to do this, filtering for parks and different green spaces, overlapping that with population data and calculating the indicator. So in all of the methodology, the overall methodology for all these indicators is very similar. And we're working with SDGs today. We created some story maps. So just wanted to show you one. Can you see it? You can see it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is SDG indicator 11 points, indicator 7.1.1, measuring access to electricity around the world. Just providing some introduction about why the indicator is important and kind of takes you through the methodology with pictures. And then at the end, it has both the national and subnational results in an interactive map. So you can toggle on and off national or subnational and take a look at the different countries. Yeah, and then a wrap up. So there's 4 different story maps that we've produced, and they all kind of have this like similar format. So I was just gonna grab the links so you guys can and put them in the chat so you guys can take a look at them. And then yeah, like any questions you guys have, please let me know. Here's some other resources too, my contact information, things like that. Okay.
Great. Thank you, James.
Yeah, of course.
I loved making that interactive too.
I tried. I think
And
it's
we'll
important to
definitely,
think about like why we're doing this and like
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And we'll definitely send those links around too. So we have 3 minutes until the end of the session. If anyone has any questions for James. And we'll send his contact info afterwards. Robert?
Yeah, I was really fascinated by those like graphs that you showed. Um, I guess my question is like, how do you think ArcGIS can help with, data disaggregation or making sure that we can more accurately represent um populations, I guess?
Yeah, I know that's super great question. ArcGIS is a great tool for doing disaggregation. Um, there's I don't know how familiar you are with JS, but there's a whole like set of tools that like are very useful for this kind of stuff. A lot of the gridded population data sets that we work with, we don't produce them, but they all use disaggregation to get like more. So you're basically like you're using ancillary data, so like data that's not related to population at a higher resolution to make estimates of where the population is. So like maybe you don't have like a good understanding of the population in a county, at a higher resolution, but you know there's a lot of roads in one section, so you can make this estimate that there's going to be greater population density near the roads, and you can do